Hey, 160. So I'll start. So last week we've argued about this a lot, about trans stuff. Lance says that being trans is having a mental illness that makes you chop your dick off. And I would argue that if it's a mental illness at all, which it isn't, it's one that makes you not chop your dick off, because I saw statistics. I found statistics from 2016, which I think are the most recent available. And 26, you got about 500,000 people in America, maybe more, maybe closer to 1 million, living as trans to some extent. And of those people, only 3,200 people had any kind of trans-related surgery at all, which could include reducing your Adam's apple or chest surgery. And of those 3,200, nobody got their vagina worked on. Nobody who started with a vagina had it turned into anything else. 0 people. And 15. So anyway, so you got 3,200 surgeries out of maybe 1 million people, which is a rate of less, roughly maybe 0.5%. And 0.5% of them, 15 people out of more than 500,000 people living trans, had their dicks worked on. 15 motherfucking people. And then I told this to my wife, and she said, well, that's not your fucking angle. She said, your angle is, what about true intersex people who who don't have much of a choice? So I looked up that shit, and one person in 2000, one baby in 2000, you have to grow up a little to see what's going to happen, is in the position of having intersex genitals. And I looked up the definition of that, and obviously it's if you have both a penis and a vagina. But to be more specific, if you have a clit that's 3/8 of an inch or less, then you're a girl. If you have a thing down there that's an inch longer or more, you're a boy. But you wouldn't want to be a boy with a 1-inch dick, but still, according to the definition, you're a boy. But that leaves all the people whose external genitals are, the penis part or clit part, are between 3/8 of an inch and an inch long. And roughly 2,500 people each year are born who are going to grow up to have that situation, which means that, it only matters for, say, 50 years. So multiply that by 50, and you've got more than 100,000 people in the U.S. who have in-betweeny genitals. And I would think that increasingly those people just live with what they have. But imagine some girl who's got, a clit that's 1 1/8 inches long in 1958. She's 12 years old, 1958. There's going to be major freaking out by by her family if they know that that's the situation. And so you've got 100,000 people in that situation, and some of those people, many more than the 15 people who had their penis worked on for trans reasons, are going to have their genitals worked on to try to get closer to whatever sex they want to be. And so you wouldn't deny those people, you wouldn't call those people crazy, right? The girl who's got a clit that's 5/4 of, 1 1/4 inches long, Lance?
I've actually had an art model that had a clit that was like that. Used to hang out when she was taking seated poses. And she happened to be a very, very, very pretty girl. And I have to admit, it was kind of a shock to see her clit hanging out like that, but it never occurred to me that she was a boy. I think that that's the furthest thing from my mind. As far as your numbers of only 15 people in the U.S. have actually changed their cocks or their vaginas. I don't
In
believe
one
that's,
year. 1 year.
yeah, I don't believe that's true. And I'll tell you why. Because I myself personally know somebody that cut off their, that went from female to male. So if I alone know somebody, what? What are the odds, if there are only 15 people in the U.S., what are the odds that I would know one? Very
Well, there
low.
aren't only 15.
So,
I looked at another study that
mhm.
looked at people worked on between 95 and 2008, so 13 years, and they found, I think, 332 people to survey about their satisfaction with what they did. And so, I mean, that's just per. So anyway, the odds are probably, I don't know, a few people per million. Say 10 people per million, 20 people per million, which
Well,
20 people per million means one person in 50,000.
okay. Here's the thing, Rick. Um, First of all, I guess it's because you're a math savant that you don't understand this argument. But let me explain it for our audience. I don't care if it's a million trans people cutting their dicks off or just one. I still think it's wrong and an example of mental illness. Okay?
Yeah, but
So it's not a,
hold on, that also means if cutting your dick off is mental illness, that means that 99.9% of trans people don't have that form of mental illness because they didn't
well,
cut their dick.
yeah, okay. Well, I would say cutting your breasts off or altering your Adam's apple or taking hormones to change your, uh, I don't know, your secondary characteristics, whatever they are, so you don't have to grow a beard. I think that's also mental illness. Yes. I whether they're just taking the hormones or chopping off their dicks, it's mental illness. In fact, I'll go one step further. Even if they don't do anything, even if they just walk around dressed as women, they're transvestites, I think that's mental illness too.
Yeah, you know what though? Mental illness is often has an organic basis. Somebody who's schizophrenic has something organically wrong with them. It's not that they lack willpower. It's that something wrong is going on, or something unusual is going on in their brains. Ditto with autistic people. It's it's call it mental illness or not, or call it whatever you want. It's a thing that's actually happening in their brains, and their brain is part of their body, so it's organic. And the deal is that we know that one person in 2000 has actual, like, hermaphroditic, some
Yeah,
degree of
if
both.
Rick, I'll cut you off on that one. You and the lovely Carol. If someone is born with two sets of genitals, that's not
Mhm.
mental illness. That person deserves either to be, treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their choice, or at the appropriate time should have an operation to pick one or the other.
Yeah, but what's the difference between somebody who is born with two sets of genitals and somebody who organically is not at home with? It seems to me like that inherent in your argument is
Yeah,
that feeling not at home with the sex you were born as isn't organic at all. That it's entirely nurture. That it's not a nature thing at all. That nobody's born at odds with the genitals of their birth. Is that what you're trying to argue?
actually, I wasn't arguing that, but I don't really care whether it's organic, whether they were born with this affliction, or whether they whether they derived it from the nurturing of evil adults around them. Either way, I think it's mental illness. And also, wait, before you interrupt me,
All right.
I don't think there is any credible science that could prove that a person was born unable to accept their genitals. I think that's something you're making up
Well,
or
no, it's something
imagining
I
is
don't know,
making
but
up.
I bet you it's something I'll look it up at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. There's someone out there that can prove that you were born not wanting to have a penis because of some structural damage in your brain. Sorry, Rick, that's absurd. No one can prove that.
I bet you. Well, look, there's all sorts of stuff that they can do with fast PET scans and all this different stuff. I mean, brain science gets more and more sophisticated, and
Mhm.
I bet you. Now, whether or not you'd be convinced by the studies, and I haven't even looked for the studies, so I don't know. But I bet
Because
you there's some work that's been done on this shit.
okay,
So
well,
anyway, that's
even if they could prove that something in the person's brain made them unable to accept their winkle, then I think they should be putting things into that person's brain to get them to accept it. I think that maybe maybe the correct response would be to say, okay, well, let's give you a hormone so you'll accept it. Let's treat
is
the
there a
problem.
hormone like? Do you think there's some kind of set of hormones that would turn straight people gay? I mean, gay people straight? Or either way, I mean, fucking, you think that that's
I,
a
I,
something
I
that,
don't I don't know, but my understanding is that almost all gay people have kind of an odd relationship with their parents. Freud described this 100 years ago,
that sounds
and
like
yeah, it's called the it's Freud called it a mother complex in the sort of charming primitive way they spoke in the 1930s. But I don't think people are gay by accident. I think that something in their family dynamics gets them to become gay.
all right. So the two keys to that one that your first sentence are Freud said and 100 years ago.
Right.
So Freud's the record of his stuff standing up to later science is not great, and it's
I
been a
don't
hundred
care.
years.
I don't care. He might have been right just about that. That might have been the only thing he was right on. But you asked me what I believe, and that's what I
All
believe.
right, so do you also believe they used to believe 50 years ago that people were autistic because their moms were cold and unfeeling? You still buy that?
I don't know anything about autism. But I'll ask you a question. Do you know any gay men that don't
Yeah.
have an odd loyalty to their mother? Because I don't. Every gay man I've ever met has a strange relationship to their mother that is unlike the relationships that heterosexuals have.
I don't know. I've been talking to my mom every day since the COVID just to
Yeah.
tell her to stay
Well,
inside and
what
everything.
what what Freud said is that what happens is the child it has an overweening mother, and so the mother develops an unhealthy attachment to the son when it's an infant, when it's a small child. And the mother does this because of some sort of difficulty with the father. And so she transfers uh, somewhat romantic feelings to the little boy. And what happens is the little boy is afraid of the father and believes that the father may castrate him because he's reciprocating with the mother. And so what happens is the boy pledges his loyalty to the mother, and he fears. Well, no, the Oedipus complex is where he's afraid of the father castrating him. In the the homosexual complex,
What, the Electra complex? Is that the
no,
opposite of the...
that's the opposite. But what Freud said was that what happens is the little boy pledges loyalty to the
Yeah.
mother. Just let me finish, okay? Then you can make fun. The little boy pledges loyalty to the mother, and as a result of that, he can't have natural relations with any other woman. And that becomes ingrained in his psyche that if he was to be with another woman, he'd be disloyal to his mother. And that's what Freud said it was.
Yeah, but that's just like, I mean, at this point, 120 years later, that just sounds like it's crazy horseshit that might be true for some teeny little... I mean, what about all the, you got maybe, I don't know, 6-8% of the population, maybe 10% that is gay to some extent, gay or bi, and that's 20 million Americans. You think that little fucking psychodrama played out for every one of those? And out of those 20 million Americans, how many of them didn't have moms? How many of them were orphaned or grew up with, raised by a dad or some fucking shit? It's like, doesn't it make more sense, especially given all the research I assume that exists, though I'd have to look up that too, that shows that there are, genetic predisposition, that certain genes are associated with an increased probability of being gay, that, you got the twin studies, I'm sure, that show that identical twins are more likely to share a sexual orientation.
Well, we've gone through this before, and basically all the literature is unreliable because a lot of gay people do the literature, and they are fascinated by this, and it always ends up that it's a biological thing, whereas there are a lot of people that are maybe unreliable on the other side, and they say, no, it's totally nurture. I can tell you this, just to avoid, we can get back to the studies issue, but I know guys that go gay because they were molested by older men when they were very, very young. And so they get confused. So it doesn't always have to be from a mother. It could be from being molested as a child. It could be, one thing I know for sure is there are studies that say that certain families have more homosexuals in them. I don't know what that means, but either way, I don't think it's... Oh, and here's my favorite argument. This is the argument that I actually proposed myself, and that is that societies can create homosexuality by encouraging it. So in ancient Babylon and ancient Greece, they had more bisexual people than they do today. And that was ended by the Jewish religion, which tried to promote heterosexuality. So there are a variety of ways, I've just mentioned 4, that you can create homosexuality. But I'm not in favor of any of them.
All right. I think we should move on to something else because I think that you've been hoisted by your own bullshit. Okay.
Well, you got me there. That's a tricky argument. I'm going to get some water.
Because, to hear you make those arguments in quick succession, I feel like I don't have to argue strongly against them because they're so obviously bullshit. Like
what? You can't make a little boy gay by molesting him?
Well, I think this.
That seems preposterous to you, huh?
All right. So, no, I think that fucking I think if somebody touches, if somebody gives you sexual pleasure at some point when you're capable of feeling sexual pleasure, that might influence your judgment about what you do later sexually.
So why am I so? What was bullshit about what I said?
Does it make you? Does it just? I don't think it flips some switch. I think that people have that much, if not most, of sexual orientation is nature. but within there, there's, is it Kinsey who had the 10 point or the 7-point sexuality scale, which is, from 0 for entirely straight to 7 is entirely gay?
Yeah,
Or was it
that was just his opinion. You can make
Well, no,
any scale you want. But
no,
I just want to add
well,
something.
yeah, you can make whatever you can put as many points, but he was the first guy to do in-depth studies of the population with huge numbers of people, and he found out that almost nobody is a pure 0 or a pure 7.
Well, that's what Kinsey wanted. Kinsey was a pervert, and that's what he wanted.
Kinsey surveyed, tens of thousands of people.
I know, and he was a pervert, and the results mysteriously indicated that we were all basically open to any sexual thing you can imagine, we're all living a lie.
That's not what the studies found. The studies found
what he wanted to find was that everyone out there was open for anything, and that's what he wanted. He wanted America to become that.
That's what he wanted. That's not what he found. He found that very few people are entirely straight or entirely gay. But that probably, most of the population is very close to the totally straight end, but there is some flexibility, and I'm sure there are people who, you put guys in prison. It's famously known that straight guys in prison will have sex with other guys, given that for a lot of them, given that there's nobody else to have sex with.
Right. That's not homosexual. That's not homosexual by choice, though. That's desperate people with no boundaries. But wait, I wanted to say one more thing because there was a very important point. There have been some very thorough studies of gay men that found that a huge number of gay men had been molested by men when they were children. Huge number, far more than the average person. So if anything, I would say that goes a long way to making somebody gay. I'm actually doubling down on that one. In fact,
I don't know. You'd have to show me the study.
Next time you meet a gay man that you're, open with and friendly with, ask him about his relationship with his mom, and ask him if an older man ever molested him when he was a little boy. And I'll bet you'll find out both of those things, bing, bing. And it's no surprise that he wound up gay.
I just think that's. There may be some statistical basis for that a kid who's a boy who's molested, that gay men had sexual contact when they were underage with other men at a higher rate than guys who live as straight. But that doesn't cause correlation. Isn't causation often it may. Among other things, like if you're somebody who's looking for kids to molest, you may look for kids who seem like they're gay. So that would automatically skew anyway. I will come back next week with studies that show and indicate that a lot of this is nature rather than nurture.
Yeah, and I'd also like you to look up the very famous studies of how many little boys that grew up to be gay were molested as little boys.
I just said I would
find
look
find that out. Yeah, find that out too, because you'll find out it's an astounding number.
All right, but the idea that it seems like the point of view you're presenting is that everybody is born either perfectly straight or with the potential to be perfectly straight, or they're mentally ill, and everybody who comes out of the womb perfect or mentally ill it only becomes gay unless if they're mentally ill or if they were molested or they had some weird relationship with their mom. And that precludes the idea that people can have different orientations to a large extent being inborn, because
Well,
we know from the statistics that that 2,500 babies are born every year with intersex genitals. And so that's where nature, if you want to call it a mistake, made a mistake in giving them genitals that are in between male and female, or both, or whatever you want to say. And then you preclude the idea that nature can make people born with different orientations.
well,
And
let me address that, okay, before you go on. First, I don't think anyone's ever proven that homosexuality can be something you're born with in the womb. That you come out of the womb and you're gay because of the way your brain has been shaped. I don't think anybody's ever proven it. It's very important to the gay community to prove that they were born that way, because it's embarrassing for the gay community to suggest that, well, you might have been heterosexual, but something happened to you in childhood that made you gay. I would say, one, we have never really been able to prove that it was nature, okay, that it was just genetic. You're just born that way. If they could prove it,
well, they do have twin studies that.
well, they have a lot of studies where they attempt to prove that people are just born gay.
Well, all right, so you talk about proof a lot. Tell me something that's been proved. Tell me something. Just tell me something that's been fucking proved.
Wait, I was trying to get to I was trying to make 2 points. I've allowed you to talk. 2 points. The first is, I don't believe that you can definitively prove that a child came out of the womb gay. I don't think that's ever been proven. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. I never said that I thought gay people were mentally ill. That's a bridge too far. I think, and the reason I'm saying that is because I know, like everyone, so many gay people that are healthy and normal and people I would enjoy being friends with. So I don't think I would go so far as to say that it's a mental illness, but I would say that there are things that happen in childhood that make a person heterosexual, that affect his heterosexuality. Makes him more passionate, less passionate. And I just believe that there are things that happen in childhood that do create the homosexual orientation, but I wouldn't say that makes a person definable as insane.
Let me ask you this, which is, what is in it for nature to have everybody be born straight? Why is that a big deal? Because you look at other species, and you have gay animals in other species. Okay.
Well, I mean,
hold on.
All right.
Oh, we'll do one more minute.
Well, let's just break because I have a long answer.
Okay.
All right, let's break.
Okay, we're back.
So I'll just answer. Rick asked me a question. He said, "What is it in nature? What is it to nature's benefit to have everybody be heterosexual, given that there are homosexual animals in nature?" And my answer to you is that a society can make everybody bisexual. If there are societies, I believe ancient Greece and Mesopotamia and Egypt, where everybody had sex with everybody. So nature, if we leave everything up to nature, people have sex with their mothers, their dogs, their brothers, gay, straight. The penis, given, if it's just allowed by nature to do what it wants, will fuck anything. So that's my answer to the nature question.
All right. So I got another question. You like to say, prove it to me. You like to say, prove that Trump had financial. Oh, also, like there is, if you want to look more into this, which I haven't because I didn't have time to read the article, but you can go to Google and you can Google twin studies homosexuality. That leads you to what looked like a really good thing that covers the area, which is biology of sexual orientation on Wikipedia.
Oh, I'm sure Wikipedia will be very objective.
Wikipedia is a group edited thing, so and they argue about every fucking thing that goes in there. Do you have a Wikipedia? You're on Wikipedia, right? People can look you up, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever looked up the people arguing about what should go in there and what shouldn't?
If there's any subject that could be divided left-right, Wikipedia will automatically cite the most left-wing opinion. They won't say Lance Richland is a fucking asshole. But if it's a subject that could be in any way dealt with by conservatives and liberals, they will automatically take the left-wing opinion and make sure they'll keep writing articles and canceling other articles over and over again until all you can see is the left-wing opinion. There are people.
I don't buy that.
Yeah,
I
know that because among other things, Dennis Prager had a problem because they when Wikipedia put out an article about him, a bunch of leftists started writing that he was a racist, an anti-Semite, just over and over again. And no matter how many times he tried to get this taken down or corrected, they wouldn't take it down. As soon as it went down, another left-winger would write immediately that he was a racist or something like that. So they do this on every issue, and their opinion about homosexuality is not credible, Rick. In fact, since the guy that came out with hydroxychloroquine came out with it, like literally within days of Trump saying that he used it, I had checked his Wikipedia article the first day, DDA Rewalt, and within 2 days, they had started to say, oh, DDA Rewalt, he's an asshole. He's a bad guy. He's wrong about everything. So they have an army of people on Wikipedia that are brainwashing you, Rick. They're always leftists.
I don't know. My experience with Wikipedia is that they're usually pretty extensive in listing different points of view. For instance, I looked up the Tulsa Massacre that happened in 1921.
Excuse me, hang on. Can you turn that down, please? Can you turn that down? No, I can't. It's too hot. All right, go ahead.
All right. So the Tulsa Massacre was one of the largest, most vicious of the past, 150 years massacres of black people by white people. But if you want to get a handle on it, I mean, when you go to Wikipedia, you learn that it was a fucking horrible thing. But if you want like exact numbers, you don't get that. You get 8 or 10 different estimates. It goes on for paragraph after paragraph of the casualties from different sources. They've listed every authoritative source's estimate of who was injured and killed.
Yeah, Rick, that doesn't prove anything, because the Tulsa Massacre is not controversial. There's not a Trump side and a Biden side on that one.
You get the same thing when you go. What's the name of the battle we talk about where the U.S. killed a bunch of Russian soldiers / mercenaries?
I forget, but it's the...
Yeah, well, anyway, if you go to that article, you get the same thing. You get like
You get the left-wing
10.
view. Yeah, you get
No,
the left-wing view.
you get 10 different estimates. You get a list of every authoritative source, and some sources that are have caveats attached is not, you have everybody who came up with an estimate that's a newspaper or a government source. You see all the estimates. So I think that in most cases Wikipedia tries to be reasonably complete as long as they can find a legitimate source.
Yeah, and I don't think they do. I think they lie like hell about anything. If it's the slightest bit political, there is an army of left-wingers that get on there and make sure that you hear the most left-wing views. Now, I know that Wikipedia is your source, so anytime you disagree with me, you immediately go to Wikipedia to find a way of rebutting whatever I've said. But I can tell you, the only thing you're doing is repeating left-wing propaganda to me.
No, when we take a 5 or a 10-minute break and I don't have time to look at that many sources, I'll start with Wikipedia because it usually points to other things, and if I have time, I can go to them. But at least I get a reasonably easy and quick to understand summary of what's going on.
Yeah, from the left-wing viewpoint. Look, this is not interesting to the.
But hold on. Okay, so I've got one more question for you, which is, you said you always like to say, "Prove it to me."
Yeah.
Like show me something that proves that there's any kind of biological inborn basis for homosexuality, and I can prove certain things. I know certain things have been proven beyond a doubt, but they're not in the soft sciences. Special relativity has been proven, to 10 decimal places. Ditto for Newtonian gravity, for things that aren't moving at relativistic speeds or in huge gravitational fields. Ditto for water being, two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom. What do you think? What do you think has been proven in not the hard sciences? Just name one fucking thing.
Well, I mean, to address your point, what the homosexual lobby wants to do is they want to find a structure in the brain, some part of the brain that is more present in homosexuals than heterosexuals, and they want to find maybe secretions, some sort of difference in the hormones. I mean, I'm not a medical anatomist, but they're looking for physical differences between the.
Are you sure that's what they're looking for? Because I think
well,
what they're
what
looking
else would
for,
it be, Rick?
They would look for genes that might be more.
Fine. Yeah, fine. Okay, fine. Good. That's another thing they would look for. Okay, a gay gene, and I don't believe
not a gay gene, but because there's, most even race, even to the extent that race exists, even something like skin pigmentation has like more than 30 genes associated with it.
Okay, and I'm just saying I don't think they found a gay gene or 30 gay genes. I don't think they've ever found that. All right, so I don't think they found it.
But
if
so
they
you
could,
like me to prove stuff. What stuff has been proven? When you think of proof, what do you think of?
besides the hard sciences?
Yeah, because you're always saying prove it to me about things that aren't the hard. We never argue about hard sciences on the show. But you were always saying prove it.
I mean, I think you can prove that the Nazis were wrong in World War II, given the laws of God and man that we all live by. I mean, I think, murder is wrong. Some people.
So let's move on. The next thing it's not a big topic, but we've all noticed it, and it's a big pain in the ass that we live in 3 different neighborhoods. And going by Twitter, it's happening all over the place. And maybe worse this year than ever before, is fucking fireworks all night. Just every 30, 45 seconds, a small barrage of explosions.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm furious because, during the height of the riots about a week ago, or there were bombs going off that I thought were bombs. I mean, they were so loud that I thought the building I was in was going to collapse. And this went on for 2 or 3 days, and I mean, literally hurt your ears. And I finally had to go somewhere. I drove in my car at night, and I saw it's fucking idiots using fireworks in the middle of the riots. In the middle of the riots. The last time you would ever need people to be setting off fireworks, at a time when we thought that the United States was going to collapse under the weight of
You said you drove
Democrats.
someplace. You drove someplace where you saw a bunch of idiots standing in the, not rioting, but standing in the streets just setting off fireworks.
No, well, I saw the fireworks. I assume idiots set them off, but who knows? Maybe they came on their own.
You saw the pretty stars, the pretty lights.
Did.
Okay.
I did, and I was pretty pissed off about it. So I would just like to ask the idiots with the fireworks, number one, don't set them off during a riot, because little Jewish boys, I'm already a nervous wreck given, my nature. But I thought they were using bombs, the rioters. That's the first thing. The second thing, wait until the 4th of July. The whole month of June does not have to be firework month, okay?
Yeah, we're recording this on June 14th, so there's still 20 days to go.
Yeah,
and I do
think
have
it's
a second.
Bastille Day in Paris, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, this has been going on for 10 days and more.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I have a second question, which is, as a former kid who really used to like blowing shit up, using fireworks, and finding them in short supply, where are people getting all their fucking fireworks from? Because I had a hard time getting fireworks, 48 years ago when I was a pyromaniac. And since then, fireworks have been shut down all over the country as being unsafe. So where the fuck are they getting all these?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but I think they're getting a lot from Mexico.
Okay.
Which is 2 hours from the border. We're
right, that
3
makes
hours
sense.
from Mexico.
Okay. I did get one load of Mexican fireworks, and they were horrible and delightful because they had very variable fuses. Sometimes the fuse wouldn't work at all, and sometimes the fuse would be so fast it would blow up next to your head before you could throw it. So, all right. Can we have the next thing be? Can we talk about Trump and whether if you're on liberal Twitter all the time, you have a bunch of talk about Trump having frontotemporal dementia, which is he's losing his frontal lobe faster than the rest of his brain, and that causes various symptoms, a whole range of symptoms which he seems to have. And then yesterday he gave the commencement address at West Point, and at one point he picked up a glass to drink, as one would when talking for a long time. And he went like this, and then he took his other hand and guided the glass to his lips. And then after, of course this is all on video, after the speech, he went down a ramp that has since been measured to have an 11-degree slope. Not this most shallow ramp, but certainly not an unusually steep ramp. And people have timed him. They use the same ramp every time they have a commencement. So they measured that it took Obama 11 seconds to go up the ramp in some previous year, and it took Trump 23 seconds to come down the ramp because he did it gingerly. And Trump himself tweeted about it, saying he didn't want to fall down and look stupid for the fake news. And he even ran down the last few steps, which he didn't do, but he did walk a little faster. And I've watched that clip of him on the ramp like a zillion times now. And I started off thinking this is definitely, something bad wrong with his brain. And then after seeing it a bunch of times, I'm left thinking that there's nothing definitive about what Trump's various behaviors. But given everything that is, that makes people wonder, he owes the presidency. The president owes the public, some clear results of testing. So that's where I'm at this point.
Well, Rick, your concern for the country is touching. And actually, it makes me feel like I'm going to have to get personal now, because this show is all about sincerity and openness and honesty. I'm going to stand up, and I want you guys to see. Can you see that these are white pants? Is that visible, Director?
Yes, yeah, we can see your pants.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know, and this is something I've never revealed before to anybody, but every single time I wear a pair of white pants, I spill coffee. I spill coffee. Now, I can't say what position I'm in when I spill the coffee. I don't know whether I'm going to be standing, sitting down, but somehow the coffee always gets on the white pants, and I may never spill coffee again for a year, except if I wear white pants again during the year. So my point is, I think the fake news and the Democrats like yourself are being a little bit petty and picky.
Okay. So I'll get personal too. In that if I'm doing anything else, talking, like concentrating about anything else, when I lift a glass to my lips, if I'm at all distracted, I will choke, because the flow of liquid into my mouth will not be precisely calibrated. I'm really thinking about it. I was very careful, but if I'm not careful, I'll choke, because I'll overflow my trachea or whatever, my epiglottis, whatever the thing is that is the gatekeeper in your throat, and I'll cough. And then so I tried, I was like, I wanted to do the experiment. I'm like, how is it to go two-handed? So I went, and I hate to admit, but it's nice because you have complete control. You can, and so I can see the argument that might be made that if you don't want to cough and choke while making a speech, maybe you go two-handed. At least maybe, if you're Trump, you go two-handed, even though it looks ridiculous.
All right. I have something. Go ahead.
Let me say one more thing, which is that he does a lot of things that it's hard to tell whether. And he's the first one to accuse Biden of being a feeble old man. But Trump does a lot of things that I've seen a zillion articles, and I don't that he had a bigger vocabulary, 30 years ago when he was talking to Howard Stern once a week and all this stuff, and the way he walks, the way he stands. People made the same arguments about Bush, like what's the matter with George Bush, because Bush was known for being a little bit fumbly while making speeches as president, and they said, but before he was president, he was much more fluid. So these arguments, it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. However, my dad's third wife, before she was married to my dad, she was the common law wife of the guy who ran the CIA's medical division, in charge of looking at foreign leaders and trying to figure out what's wrong with them. Like they take a look at video of Brezhnev, reviewing a parade or walking into a thing, and they have a bunch of doctors scrutinize this shit and try to decide how healthy Brezhnev was, and he used to be the Putin of the Soviet Union, 35 years ago. And, if he isn't perfectly healthy, what's wrong with him? And if we're looking at Trump, then certainly foreign countries are looking at Trump and trying to draw conclusions about, is he healthy? What's going on with that? So I'm just saying that it would be nice to have some clarity.
Well, listen, I was going to tell you a little story about X-Acto knives. X-Acto knives are these incredibly sharp knives, just incredibly sharp. And as a sculptor, I used to have to use X-Acto knives constantly. And I just want to say that every time I've kidded around about how idiots always poke themselves with X-Acto knives, literally the second I say idiots poke themselves with X-Acto knives, I will then poke myself with the X-Acto knife. So, these things can happen to anyone, even mentally Olympic level mentalities like myself.
Right. I've cut the top of my finger off. Like as a kid, I used to build models, and you slice off like a little flap that's about a quarter inch across the very tip with X-Acto knives.
Yeah, you can drink that model building glue too. I don't know if you know that, but you can pour it down your throat. Anyway,
no. Did you build models as a kid? Probably not.
No, I did, but they were always covered in glue and kind of shaped imperfectly, and
right, because we didn't have discipline and control. Like a real model builder, we would just snap the pieces off the tree and glue them in. A real model builder will cut them off the tree and then file down the sprue so they fit exactly. Every time I put a car windshield in, big gluey fingerprint.
Yeah.
Also, the glue, back when we were kids, hadn't been designed to be sniff-proof yet. So if you worked on a model for an hour really close in, you would get high as fuck. You didn't mean to, but you would be high.
I don't know if young people these days know this, but when I was a kid, they used to have soft toys like teddy bears and little snakes or chickens or whatever, and they would have like ears and eyes, and those ears and eyes were kept on the teddy bear by long, rusty spikes that you could easily stick in your own eye. It's amazing that any of us survived. We used to have 20-foot diving boards at the local pools, where if you were off, if the wind got you the wrong way in the middle of the dive, your head would crack right open on the side of the pool. So, I mean, I don't know. I can't believe any of us survived. I mean, Go ahead.
I think new diving boards are prohibited in Los Angeles, maybe even old diving boards, because I don't think you're allowed to, unless you're a facility that's been licensed for people, actual, divers on a team. If you have a house, you're not going to put a diving board in. Those haven't been put in LA for probably 30 years.
Every public pool had them, and if you were 8 years old and you had the nerve to climb 20 feet into the air, you could jump off the diving board.
And you better have had the nerve, because otherwise you were a pussy.
Exactly. You'd be goaded up there by the other the other boys who, by the way, and no wonder Generation X and the millennials are so confused. I mean, you had to overcome a lot of challenges to become an adult male when we were kids, All right. So as far as Trump goes, I will say this: he is the only president in my lifetime that is really standing up to China. And I think that we're going to come just short of war with China in the next couple of years. We're going to go into a Cold War that is going to be like an ice Cold War. I hope to God we can avoid war, but if you want to talk about a president that is, really pissed off at China and willing to guard his country from all of the various ways the Chinese can affect us, Trump. Trump's the only man in the Senate, the only man in the Congress, the only man in the U.S. that is really going to stand up to him. And for that, I'm very proud of him.
But
So I don't.
you suggest an argument against testing Trump, which goes back to the old Cold War with mutually assured destruction. There was an argument made in the Cold War 40, 50, 60 years ago that each side needed to build as many nukes as possible so that if either side dared to use nukes on the other side would respond with such huge number. Each side would have just a huge orgasm of thousands of missiles flying. You've seen this in old movies, including war games, of thousands of missiles in the air, and then each side, along with the rest of the earth, is obliterated. And the argument was that once nuclear missiles existed, each side had to have so many that neither side would risk the destruction of Earth. And that argument was called mutually assured destruction. There was another related, not exactly, but kind of from roughly the same era, well, from the Nixon era, called madman theory, which is you don't want to mess with the U.S. because Nixon might be crazy. Who knows what he's going to do? So similarly, you could make that argument about Trump, where nobody knows what Trump's going to do. He'll tweet anything. He'll fucking let's not test him. Let's have a crazy guy in the Oval Office in case China's thinking about doing anything, because Trump might just fucking overreact. Yeah, one thing that Trump has been reasonably consistent about, and I'm probably letting the liberal side down and not listing counterexamples, is he doesn't like war very much. He hasn't gotten us into any new conflicts. And he's tried to shut, with various degrees of whatever. He's tried to pull troops out of stuff. So do I think Trump would hesitate to pull the troops? A non-madman Trump. Let's assume that Trump doesn't have frontotemporal dementia. That Trump would be very reluctant to pull the trigger on anybody.
Well,
he'll go to economic war, but he won't fucking threaten somebody with nuclear. Well, actually, no, he's threatened North Korea with obliteration, but in general, he's not a guy to send in troops.
Well, that's I agree with you on that, Rick. But the real fear that I have, and this is something that was mentioned by Richard Nixon, 50 years ago, and that is that the Chinese have such a huge population and are so fanatical in their beliefs about communism that we could literally launch all our bombs at China and they would still have 500 million people left alive. That's, almost 2 United States. So my fear is that the Chinese will say, look,